landscape of the country, the SDG implementation challenges and financial gaps that we have. We would also take a deeper dive to understand the innovative financing framework, tools, instruments which are there. We will also try to touch upon and hear from our colleague from Bangladesh to look at the gaps in SDGs and how these have been addressed or in the process of being addressed. We will also hear some practical challenges and opportunities on implementation of the financing instruments. And lastly, we would also hear about social finance mobilization and the value of outcome-based financing in the country. We have a group of very, very expert panelists and speaker. I would request Mr. Adnan Pasha Saab, advisor to the Federal Minister for Finance and Revenue, to please come at the stage. I would also request Dr. Sajid Amin Saab, Executive Director, Deputy Executive Director, STPI, to join us on the stage. Anthony Garma, Chief of Nutrition and Office in Charge for Deputy Representative, UNICEF Pakistan Country Office. We have Professor Mustafizur Rahman from the Center for Policy Dialogue, Bangladesh. Please welcome. Ms. Shifmaila Rifakat, Head of Innovation Investments from Karandas. Ms. Shameen Bashir, Head of Social Finance from Asian British Trust. Has Dr. Ambrina Bakhtiar, Chief Sustainable Development Goals from the Ministry of Planning, Development and Special Initiatives. Madam, please join us on the stage. For the session, we would try to have a very interactive conversation. We will hear from the distinguished panelists and speakers, and then we will delve into a Q&A session. I would request Dr. Sajid Amin to please start by setting a brief just a second, ma'am.
I think giving me the scene setting in such a distinguished panel is a bit unfair. So we have really very special people on the topic. So I'll just be limiting myself to more on thanking all of you to join us. Also all the distinguished panelists on this side on behalf of SDPI and on behalf of UNICEF as well. I welcome you all on this first day of 28th Sustainable Development Conference, 16th South Asia Economic Summit, 9th UNESCAP SDGs Forum, and 3rd Sustainable Investment Expo. I think to me, if I have to pick, this is the most important topic or theme of the conference, because this is about the future of Pakistan, the future generation, the human capital, the children, the youth, the health, the education. So all the building bricks of any country, that is what we will be discussing today, that how to finance that. And I'll give you just one number that in this year, the allocations for debt servicing are 8.2 trillion rupees. And the total development expenditure allocations are roughly 4 trillion. And they are expected to cut down roughly to 3 trillion if we go on further stabilization mode and engaging with the IMF. So this is the difference you see. Only debt servicing is more than 2 times, roughly 2.5 times, 2.3 times of the entire development expenditure of Pakistan, federal and provincial. And this is where the challenge is. The resources are limited. Fiscal space is shrinking every day. Climate shocks, climate disasters, debt servicing, rising debts are taking whatever we have. At the same time, slowing growth because we are in a stabilization mode. The revenue generation is not picking up. We are stuck around 9% of GDP as a, and most importantly also, this number to me itself, 9% of GDP, needs a bit scrutiny. Where is that 9% coming from? At what cost it is coming from? This is coming from the pockets of the people, from the indirect taxes, those who need actually the support. So we are roughly having 60% of our revenues, tax revenues, from the indirect taxation. And of that 60%, if we consider 100%, 70% is coming from GST, the general sales tax. So not only that we are less in revenues, we are bad in revenues. The revenues are coming. But at the same time, we have one of the highest population growth rate, 2.55%. Roughly 60% population, youth under 30. And this is where the challenge comes. You have to invest. So the trade-off is whether to service debt or invest in this young Pakistan, the people. And if we see the forecast next 2-3 years at least, when we are in IMF program, it will be slow growth, higher reliance on indirect taxation, energy taxation, lesser revenues. So the situation does not seem to be changing in next at least 3 to 5 years. So what is the option? The option is one that you have to finance social investments. They cannot be left anymore. The residual focus on development expenditure has to go. They has to take a priority seat. But the question is, where will the finance come from? And that is the question today that very distinguished panel will be speaking on. That given low growth, high population growth, low fiscal space, bad taxation, where can the money come from to invest in education, to invest in health, to invest in skill development, to skill in early child development, and all these factors. So I think this is why this is the most critical questions that we will be looking forward from our distinguished panelists. And I'll conclude that we have to find these ways. This is not an option. If we have to invest our social sector, if we have to improve our social investments, the existing financing mechanisms, the existing financing resources will not be of any help. You have to find alternates. And those alternates not only provide you revenues, they have their own impacts. They increase fiscal spaces. If well raised, well utilized, they contribute to the fiscal space. They contribute to employment generation. They contribute to GDP growth rate. But the last question that I'm leaving, and the hardest question, what are those options that Pakistan can explore? So back to you. Thank you so much. And I can, you can. No.
Okay. Thank you so much, Dr. for very brief and very crisp remarks, and for also jogging our memory to some very critical issues which are not new, and that you very rightly pointed to is the efficiency of investments and the efficiency of spending, which we often talk about and debate about. And I think the fundamental question that remains is, there are options, there are non-public instruments. Even if they are implemented and secured, how can we ensure the efficiency and effectiveness of these investments? I think that's an important question which the subsequent speakers would like to touch upon. I would also like to introduce one of the colleagues who has joined us online from the Bank of Punjab, Mr. Mohammad Mateen Farooq Saab. Please, my apologies, I missed that out earlier. Now I would like to invite Mr. Adnan Pasha Saab to please share his remarks.
esteemed delegates, members of the development sector, academia, media, ladies and gentlemen, assalamu alaikum. So, Dr. Saab, thank you very much, Sahir Saab, and pleasure meeting you, Dr. Sandar. We'll stay in touch because of the work you've done in the past, but um, thanks for inviting me to this gathering. It's an august gathering, and it's an honor to address this plenary. And arguably the most defining challenge of our generation, which is bridging this sustainable development fiscal gap. Now, I'll take more than little more than sort of 10, 15 minutes, because I'm going to talk about how we can actually work towards a solution, because I'd rather be part of the solution than part of the problem. And we all need to work collectively. And I know some of the people here on the panel, and they're already working on some of the initiatives that we have launched. And they will talk about it themselves as well. So, here we are. I mean, we are here to confront a stark global reality. Dr. Saab, you mentioned what's happening in the world. The developing world is currently grappling with a lost decade scenario where high debt burdens, as you already mentioned, they constrain the global fiscal space. That's starving the essential services offered internationally, not just in Pakistan. So with that, if you just look at one metrics, 48 nations, the home to about 3.4 billion people, they spend more servicing debt, as you said, than funding basic healthcare. And I'm going to come and back to healthcare and how that impacts society at large and how we can work together to address it. And traditionally, the ODA, the official development assistance, is declining internationally. It's not just for Pakistan, right? So we are not being targeted. Development capital is scarce, and unless linked to specific impact linked outcomes-based metrics, we will be in limbo. So let's be clear, we have to start helping ourselves, and then people will come. Now, I'm going to sort of change the tone of this whole thing from where we can get money and all that to how we can actually convince people to invest in Pakistan, invest in our most important asset, which is the human capital, and how we do it for generations. So the structural crisis, forces a necessary truth for us. We must fundamentally shift our strategy. We must ask, not for more money, but how we can start mobilizing smarter, fairer, faster finance linked to addressing our core national threats. In Pakistan, this global constraint collides with our most urgent national threats. And we face a convergence of two existential threats. I've been writing about it. The Honorable Finance Minister was speaking very vociferously about that. And that's unchecked population growth and the extreme climate vulnerability. Now, those are words if you don't go into the depth of it. So the climate risks are not just abstract threats to our national security. So I'm going to look at it from that prism, because people need to understand how complex this is rather than complicating things. So primarily, they're interlocked, and they interlock with food security, water security, and our energy security paradigms. The economic cost of this dual crisis, climate and population, it's measurable and it's immediate. Unmitigated climate change combined with natural disasters, and we see this all the time, we live it, could cost our economy up to 9% of our GDP by 2050. That's a big number, right? And air pollution, a chronic hazard, and now you see it in Punjab, Potahar mein bhi kam hai, already imposes an additional yearly loss of about 6.5% of our GDP. This is pretty serious. So I'm giving you facts and figures, so please go research it, the impact it has on our fiscal space as well. Now, in this environment of severely constrained public resources, we cannot afford to treat climate action or human development as optional development spending. We must reframe the narrative. Investing in climate is not charity. It's the smartest, most sustainable development investment possible for not just the world, specifically for us. And investing in children is not charity. And it's the foundation for our future national productivity. So keep productivity in mind and keep investment in mind. Now, this conviction is the catalyst for our new strategy, which is a social impact financing framework, which is about results. It's not about promises and how we deliver that. So for decades, many nations, including ourselves, we've been struggling with a credibility gap rooted in stop and go reform cycles. We are doing a lot of reforms now, and time will tell how we implement it. It's all about how you implement it rather than just talking about it. You heard yesterday as well from the finance minister and the economic team what's being done. And we are going to, so slightly off topic, but you should know, we are going to actually start communicating a bit more so people understand. And because people, myself, I'm also anxious because we want to see results today. But what's happened over decades because of our ignorance, collective ignorance, is because of that, this is where we are. So now we need to, come back and do these reforms. And it will take time. Dr. Saab was mentioning time, and it will take time. But we need to be patient, but we need to use this time collectively in a very structured manner. So we spend money, but often the impact is muted because the capital was directed at actions or inputs rather than verifiable, measurable outcomes. So the framework that I was referring to was curated as a background for people who do not know about it, with a cross-sectional, high-powered committee comprising of subject matter experts and senior government functionaries. It was constituted by the Honorable Prime Minister, it's chaired by the Finance Minister, and it's our institutional technology designed to overcome this inconsistency that I've been referring to. It shifts our operating model to impact-linked financing. It provides a roadmap to mobilize private and philanthropic capital for outcome-based investments. And it transfers performance risk from the government to the private investors. And they can provide the upfront sort of working capital via sort of pay for results contracts. An example of that is the Pakistan Skills Impact Bond being launched soon by NAFTEC. We have someone here who will be talking about it. And it's important you hear how it's done and then how we can sort of proliferate more of that in a structured manner. Now, they not only only get repaid when an independent verification agent confirms we have hit the sort of pre-agreed targets or impact markers. This is about accountability hardwired into the deployment of every dollar. It's how we attract the institutional capital required for the long-term horizon of programs. For example, the World Bank Group, we initiated a country partnership framework as of the 1st of July this year. It's a 10-year program, $20 billion. And parallel to that is another $20 billion that we don't talk about as much, which is for the private sector, which is through the IFC. Right? So that's $40 billion. So when people say, paise kahan se aayenge? We have two envelopes. So I'll tell you how we draw down on those, right? Because that's very important for this audience, the academia, the think tank community, and the practitioners who will design, these programs so that we can take from the envelope, which are linked to outcomes and specific outcomes. So our national pipeline, it's anchored directly into three non-negotiable pillars of human capital and climate security identified into this framework. The first pillar, and there are three pillars that I'll refer to. First is ending the crisis on child stunting. So we face a deep human crisis, and it is most severe in terms of the symptoms from a child stunting perspective. Those among you who are from academia, and especially from the medicine, or from the science side, very important that we take you on board on this when we're designing solutions. Now, this leads to reduced cognitive ability and lowers lifelong productivity. The national stunting rate for children under 5 hovers around 40% officially. But in our poorest rural districts, where poverty and health policy failures converge, this rate spikes to an alarming figure of more than 60%. This failure persists because stunting is not just a food problem. It is inextricably linked to a combination of poor nutrition, absence of safe potable water, sanitation, hygiene services, and high fertility rates leading to low birth spacing as well. we tend to ignore these things. And I'm sorry, I don't want to go into a gender thing, but most men don't understand this in this society in South Asia. So it's important that I say it the way it is, because these things are important. And if you're a female, you will understand this much better. But men also in the society need to understand. It's something that we always find taboo discussing in our society, but that's the reason we are where we are. The national stunting, for this, sort of to work, under this envelope that we can utilize, we need subject matter experts, and I refer to medical specialists to be at the core of the teams within the development sector, who can design and implement programs nationwide that can be addressed over a 10-year horizon. Interlinked multi-sectoral projects can be put in at the grassroots. They are being looked at in 2 provinces more prominently, and 2 are lagging in that. But these all come from the ground up, right? We can't force things onto people. We need people to not just create awareness and build capacity, but for these programs to come up from the ground. And there are specific outcomes that I'm going to share with you, which you may not know about, but please keep the figures in mind, because when you're designing programs, they could be of various size and shape. They have to address these outcomes. So from a reducing stunting perspective, I'm trying to set the tone because you understand, because the follow-on conversation should flow from this to how we solve this. 50 million adolescent women and infants under the age of 2.5 to receive nutrition supplementation, better access to quality healthcare, and remote access to in the rural areas of solution delivery. It could be through telemedicine or other means, but in a more structured manner that can be verified. So then you can touch the envelope. Another metrics is 30 million young women to receive population planning and family optimization advisory that reduces fertility in combination with the age of first pregnancy while increasing birth spacing. The third is 60 million people to receive safely managed water and sanitation services, particularly targeting low-income people. And people always have this debate about, where our population lies, and there's a whole debate going on that based on what the World Bank report tells you. But it's low income. It could be in urban areas, peri-urban, rural areas, and with most focused on adolescent women and children under the age of 2.5, because that's where it starts. That's where it starts. And they do not have money to spend on, I don't like taking names of products, but I'll take one, Morinaga, if it's for 2,600 rupees, how many people do you know can afford that in this country? Maybe the lower middle class, but the masses cannot, right? So let's keep things in mind, and in perspective as well, because it has to percolate down. It can be subsidized to an extent, but to what extent can we afford to do that? Now, in all of this, I haven't mentioned financing yet, because that can be handled. Let's look at what the pillars are and then talk about the instruments. So the second pillar is reducing learning poverty. Again, it's linked to stunting as well, because children coming up, and we say कि बड़ा सरमाया है, लेकिन अगर वो सरमाया को basic tools handle ना करने आए, so we're producing people who will not produce results or productivity for this country. It is not going to be a population dividend. It's going to be a population bomb. So the situation in education is an emergency, unfortunately. And we have 25 million children out of school. That's the last figure I have. But for those who are enrolled, learning poverty is cripplingly high. It's around 77%. This means 7 out of 10 children who are sort of in the age of 10, they cannot read and understand a simple age-appropriate text. Forget about English, Urdu as well. Now, this rate is significantly higher than the regional average of South Asia. So the goal is for us to support in reducing this poverty rate, learning poverty rate, to under 60% in the next 10 years. So that time is important. It will not happen sooner. It will take 4, 5, 6, 7 years. And then supporting 12 million students at the foundational level, primary, secondary, especially through incentivization linked to access to schooling, with particular emphasis on transitioning from primary to secondary at higher learning standards, which need to be determined, and then they need to be implemented and then monitored. The third pillar, which most people acknowledge, they talk about, and we're trying to do something about it already, uh, and again, it's non-negotiable, is climate security. We must simultaneously build resilience from an adaptation perspective and fund the clean energy transition, which is the mitigation part. So I'll talk about both briefly. So for impactful adaptation, the objective is to enhance resilience to floods and climate-related disasters for 75 million people over a 10-year horizon. Okay. Now for that, and the reason I'm saying that is because when you put a project into place, it will, from its initiation to action, to implementation, to monitoring, it takes time. And we, the population number is still growing, right? So now this can be done through risk transfer, which is a mechanism. It has been tested. And recognizing the catastrophic potential of the climate shocks we receive, we must deploy cutting-edge tools to protect our most vulnerable citizens. And this includes instruments like the parametric insurance, area yield insurance for farmers, and disaster-linked metrics for flood-prone and coastal areas. So on area yield insurance, both Bank of Punjab, and they can maybe talk about it later, and HPL tested this instrument for, I think, 2 consecutive years, 2 years ago. And now we are still discussing, because now I'm leading that from the Ministry of Finance, how we can actually scale it up to a national level and bring the costs down of implementation, because it's very expensive. It's around 5 or 6% per annum, and farmers can't afford that. So we'll have to figure out who's going to subsidize it, unless we use better measures rather than the land records, which are not very accurate. So these instruments, they'll provide you immediate liquidity to the farmers, and most of your farmers are smallholder farmers under 12.5 acres. And this will be based on predetermined weather triggers, bypassing the slow government budgetary processes, because you don't want to come to Q Block for this, and you don't want to go to any ministry or to the state bank. The payout is going to be designed very differently, right? And it can come into people's wallets, into their digital wallets if they have that, or we're going to build out the rails to provide that funding out. Because for the next round of sowing, they will need cash. So they're not going to wait for, CLIS, crop insurance and all that kicks in once someone declares an emergency, which could take weeks, if not months at times. So for this, reinsurers need to be provided access to satellite data, and that ensures a multi-year historical look back on crop health, as well as predictive model-based estimation enabled link to climate patterns. These we've tested. Just so you know, we did a soft launch 3 weeks ago through the State Bank. We're providing first loss as the government of Pakistan for the smallholder farmers only at the moment, nationwide. And it's being tested where they'll be, the banks who always been reluctant, they will be able to use data from Saparco and LIMS, and they can do a look back on what was grown in the fields, the quality, the health of the crops, and what sort of yield came up. So those models are being tested. And it's the first time we are doing that. It's just a nationwide program, which the Prime Minister will formally launch as well. Then there's also, what we call blue finance, which is, you can leverage thematic bonds, which can be earmarked specifically for water-related sustainable projects, like coastal restoration, urban wastewater treatment, can also be linked to satellite remote sensing data sets. And these blue bonds, therefore, water security, and they can be simultaneously, they can function like a public health bond, critically reducing the chronic infections that drive child stunting. So it, again, goes back to our human capital element. The last is sort of the infrastructure linked to the prevention and technology-based early warning systems that can be considered under this country partnership framework. So it's pretty broad. It's what I'm trying to convey here is very simple. Come up with projects. Come up with projects that we can help you make bankable. Please do not talk to me about debt swaps and this and that. I'm a banker for 30 years, and I traded instruments. So we know about these products. Come up with simple, bankable projects that are linked to outcomes for this country. We will get them financed. Let's not talk about पैसा कहाँ से आएगा. वो आ जाएगा. Don't worry about it, right? And the reason I'm saying this for the second time is because it gets lost in translation at times. People always blame कि जी पैसा कहाँ से आएगा. अगर आपके पास projects नहीं होंगे and you can't implement them and you can't show the outcomes, you're going to have donor fatigue. You're going to have this credibility gap widening because of where we are right now in geopolitics. So all these projects can contribute to outcomes that strengthen food and nutritional security, water security, which can involve deepening the agriculture value chains, which is very important for this country, from a food enrichment perspective, going back into addressing the stunting aspect, and processing and logistics, which can be curated, and you can do this in a public-private partnership, for which we have another, as I said, the IFC window to draw from as well. Again, 20 billion IBRD, 20 billion over the next 10 years from the IFC, just them. I haven't even touched ADB or anyone yet, right? So from the prism of mitigation and cleaner energy, we must cut high cost and environmental damage of fossil fuels by transitioning to clean energy. A lot has been written about it by the SDPI, and a lot of work, thank you, has gone into it by you, and it feeds into the policy that was framed. So the financial architecture and the CPF, it's designed to enable over the next 10 years, 10 gigawatts of renewable energy capacity. Furthermore, the framework that we're working within, it's directed at a multi-sectoral air quality program with measurable outcomes, a 36% reduction in population-weighted fine particulate matter. The baseline at the moment is 55 micrograms per cubic meter. We want to bring it down to 35 micrograms. For those of you who are familiar with the terminology, you can do more research and advise us on projects that can be fed into the envelope. Now, this transition is essential for environmental health and for the economic competitiveness of our industry. Because if it's not competitive, then you can forget about what we talk about as export-led growth and all the good stuff. It will not happen, right? So it's important we look at it holistically rather than just in silos. And this can be explored in agricultural solid waste, energy efficiency construction, but the primary driver is the automotive sector. For which the government has already incentivized the transition of EVs, of the entire auto sector through the new HEV policy. Just made बहुत input from SDPI. So I'm very grateful for that. And the launch of the subsidized bank financing of electric 2- and 3-wheeler transport. Again, the Ministry of Finance, we're providing the first loss guarantee on that to banks. And we're also providing a subsidy that has been negotiated. So this we have built in, because जब बात करते हैं लोग IMF की, this has been built into that program, and we draw against that as well, that we will do this transition. And that's called the RSF. आपने उसके बारे में पढ़ा भी होगा. So the alternate financing toolkit, which is what you wanted to hear, but I gave you a background of, these are the problems, this is where I need your help, or the government needs your help. The sheer scale of this ambition requires us to treat every asset, even our national debt, as a potential solution. So we're actively pursuing high-impact innovations like debt for impact swaps. And this mechanism, it turns our current debt burden into an opportunity by negotiating debt relief, conditionally on the freed-up funds being immediately redirected towards pre-agreed, verifiable social and climate projects. We have a powerful blueprint of that from the Ivory Coast. They did, it was a 400 million euro debt for development swap, which directly channeled the savings into education infrastructure. So we seek to apply the same model for a debt for for a child impact swap, tied directly to stunting reduction and learning poverty metrics. Developing sustainable revenue streams can also be done by creating self-funding mechanisms, which is critical in including we can include levies, we can look at syntax, on certain unhealthy consumables. Uh, so, we can fund that by channeling that sort of pot of money that accumulates and gets tagged to health projects, which are sort of, again, outcome linked, and that require immediate cheap funding, rather than drawing from, you're going and borrowing from banks and other multilaterals. The funding can come locally. You do not need to go abroad for expensive funding for that. So you can also transition the health insurance, and we're looking at Sehat Sahulat on that as well, uh, from a non-contributory model to a co-contribution model for higher income individuals and families. The instruments, like, you're very familiar with the partial risk guarantees, political risk insurance. I was just 2 weeks ago, we were in Washington, the annual meetings. We discussed this with MIGA as well, and other participants. These are essential tools for de-risking investments in critical long-term infrastructure projects, so we can make them bankable for other commercial investors to come in. We're moving moving very, very quickly and past this ambiguity of traditional aid, offering a transparent system rooted in governance, accountability, and the measurable achievements of defining human and environmental outcomes. Trying to transform threats into measurable de-risk investment opportunities, because that's what people want to do. People who invest through vehicles, or countries who are reluctant to invest outside of their borders into other markets unless you show them a return. Um, so while considering these financing solutions, we need to also secure robust outcome-linked projects, again, for the defined pillars, the 3 defined pillars. And this requires capacity transformation and willingness to reform ourselves and from within. The aspects that require a behavioral change so that we can prioritize what is critical today. So if something needs to be reprioritized, then we will do that. Whatever's already been sort of expensed or committed, we're not touching that at all. We're just saying all this new funding I'm talking about can be utilized in that manner. Line ministries are already getting aligned under the social impact financing framework to ensure a whole of government approach, and MOF is leading that to address these challenges. So I'm inviting the global development partners and investment community here, the think tank people, and especially the subject matter experts in these areas to come up and sort of co-design the next wave of the pipeline. Applying, there's a child lens investing framework of the UNICEF, and do tell us about it, because I've read about it, but we need to start using whatever's been used, shamelessly copycat and borrowing from Ajay Banga's, because I was there listening to him. So just shamelessly copy what is successful in another country. And then we can co-invest in outcome-linked instruments that will secure financial returns tied to the achievement of social and climate targets. So this is more than a strategy, it's a structured commitment to institutional clarity and long-term policy coherence. At times we lack that, but then you have to come back in and remain steadfast. And it's a path to a resilient, prosperous, and secure future for the children of Pakistan. And it's also a national commitment to the environment. Okay, so thank you very much. I took a lot of your time, but it's important you understand what we're doing already. And tomorrow, it may be someone else here, but what we're setting up now, we want to make it sticky. We're designing it in a way, or it's been designed already now in a way, after doing the basic diagnostic of what the problem is. How do we address the problem? And now please go and find us projects in these 3 areas to start off with. Thank you very much.
To invite partners.